Hi guys, this is the next part of What If Gohan Never Stopped Training. I hope you enjoy it. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe as it helps me a lot and to ensure you never miss another exciting story. The road to hell is indeed paved with good intentions. All night long, as soon as Gohan felt it would be safe for him to relax, somebody did something stupid. It was as though they had not only forgotten everything they had learned in the last 10 days, but lost any shred of common sense they might have been blessed with. Piccolo had stayed with him, lending him strength. By morning, Gohan felt as though he had gone 10 rounds with Cell. By evening he was wishing he had never had the bright idea to let the Bakas do anything on their own. Gohan had stopped counting how many times he had to pull someone out of a dangerous situation after the 32nd time. He had done this at 4, it was not that hard. That night, Gohan was just about ready to let them deal with the consequences of their own foolishness without his help. But as soon as he had that thought, he had to go rescue Arasa. She and her father had set up near a game trail and several Carnos had started to surround their shelters. If he had let go of his net, his friend would have died. No one was allowed to die because of his inaction ever again. Friday morning finally came and with it, the pairs were slowly returning to the main camp. Gohan carefully examined the surrounding area. Everyone was nearly back to camp and he could not feel any dangers nearby. For the first time in over 2 days, Gohan completely let go of his net. Moaning in relief, he and Piccolo sank to the ground. Piccolo had fine tremors running through his body. His normally vibrant skin had a sickly yellow cast to it. Gohan was a wreck, his energy was severely depleted. The lack of rest and nutrition had left him weak and nauseous. Never again, kid. Do you hear me? Never, ever again will I go on another school trip with you. Don't worry, after this, neither will I. Groaning, he held his aching head in his hands. Give me Frieza, the Spice Boys or even Cell, just not another field trip. They were still trying to recover enough to head back to their campsite when Krillin found them. Hey guys, we're back, Krillin called out happily. He had enjoyed the last couple of days. He strolled over to Gohan and Piccolo, not realizing their condition until he got a better look at them. What happened to you two? He shouted frantically, racing over to kneel beside them. Just shut up and go get some senzus. Piccolo demanded. Nodding, Krillin blasted off to Korin's tower. Unfortunately, Krillin's shout had drawn attention to them. Several members of the group ran over to them, intent on helping. Piccolo growled at them, hoping they would get the message. Sadly, he was so tired that the noise lacked its usual violence. Mr. Sun, what happened? Were you attacked? Mr. Hayek was looking them over for any obvious wounds or trauma. Don't touch me, Piccolo spat out. Fortunately for Mr. Hayek's continued existence, Krillin returned before Piccolo could find the energy to make him move away. Sorry guys, Korin only had one left. Krillin said apologetically. Give it to Gohan, Piccolo instructed. Krillin handed it to Gohan, who was now glaring at Piccolo. Nice try, but you need it too. Gohan broke the little bean in half, making Piccolo take his portion. Piccolo sneered at him, but ate his half, knowing further protest was pointless. Rising, he helped Gohan to his feet, holding him steady. Half a bean had not been nearly enough to restore the vast amounts of energy the kid had expended protecting the group. Still supporting Gohan, Piccolo turned to Krillin. The Bakas are all yours. He is done instructing them and he is done protecting them from their own stupidity. I don't care who is about to drown, fall off a cliff or be eaten, even if Cell himself comes after you, you are on your own. With that, Piccolo pulled Gohan into the sky. As soon as they landed, Gohan gave into his exhaustion. Piccolo was left with no choice but to follow. Krillin blinked in surprise. Whatever had happened to them had left Gohan's ki dangerously depleted. Even after consuming half a senzu bean, his energy levels had remained very low. Coach, Videl asked softly, what could do that to Gohan? She had never seen him like that. His skin had been almost transparent and his eyes had looked bruised from fatigue. I don't know. Turning back to the group, Krillin asked, who all saw him in the last couple of days. We did. We had just gotten started when this T-Rex came out of nowhere. It was huge, with scars across its face and hardly any tail left. We did not even have a chance to run. It was too close. Suddenly Gohan was right there, standing between its teeth and us. The strangest thing happened then. It took one look at the boy and ran. If I did not know better, I would say it was scared of him. One father-son team shared. We decided to stay outside for a while that first night to look at the stars. I don't know what all came at us, it was too dark. He was just suddenly there and saved us. Came from another team. We were trying to climb up a cliff. I fell but Gohan caught me before I hit the ground. Sharpener offered. We accidentally set up by a game trail last night. I have never seen so many teeth. They were everywhere. All I saw was a flash of light, and then Gohan moved us to a safer place. Arasa whispered. The experience had terrified her. We were crossing a river. The current was too strong for us. I remember it pulling us under. The next thing I knew, we were on the other side and Gohan was standing over us. Another team in the group said. One by one everyone came forward. Gohan had helped or saved every single pair at least once. Some teams multiple times over. What is the matter with you people? Did you forget everything you learned? Gohan was very specific in his safety lessons. Krillin shouted angrily. Now he understood why Gohan had been so exhausted. There was no way he had been able to sleep with all of the trouble the group had been in over the last 2 days. What about you, coach? Sharpener asked. Did you and Videl see him? Krillin lightly blushed. Well, yeah, we may have gotten lost once or twice. Gohan had had to turn them around twice that first day. They had laughed about it each time, but Krillin had to admit he appreciated his new knowledge. The Z warriors relied heavily on ki sensing and control. During the initial fight with the androids, their usual methods had been useless. Krillin knew Gohan had merely been doing his best to give him an additional skill set to fall back on. Sharpener laughed. Coach, how did you get lost? I seem to remember some very specific navigation lessons. Mr. Hayek stepped forward. Will they be back? He asked, gesturing in the direction Piccolo and Gohan had gone in, his tone apprehensive. If it is up to Piccolo, no, they are not coming back. Krillin stated. He is not about to let anything happen to that kid and we blew it, big time. But, Mr. Hayek was beside himself. Krillin just shook his head. Gohan had already taught them everything they needed. All they had to do was use what had been given to them. Videl could hardly believe how much her life had changed from a simple field trip. She had been dreading going home. How was she going to face her father? But when the jet had landed yesterday, she found she didn't have to. 18 had simply walked up to her and told her they were going shopping. She had spent the rest of the day with her. They ransacked a few stores, eaten ice cream, and seen a movie. Videl could not remember ever having a day like that. Since her mother had passed away when she was 7, there had been no foolish shopping trips in her life. After the movie had ended, Videl had braced herself, expecting 18 to take her home then. Instead, she had taken her to a house on the edge of Satan City. It still had a sold sign in the yard. Krillin and Marin were inside, curled up together on the couch with a book. After putting the little girl to bed, Krillin and 18 had led her to the table to talk. Coach had held her hand, explaining that he had gained her father's permission and if she wanted to, she could stay with them. This morning, she had been woken up by Marin jumping on her instead of the maid politely tapping on the door. She had had breakfast with everyone sitting down together instead of the butler bringing her a plate in the silent and empty dining hall. Then, Coach had picked her up and flown her to school. She was so used to being alone that she felt overwhelmed by how much contact she had had just in a single morning. Videl was not the only one reminiscing on the weekend's events. Gohan shifted uncomfortably in desk. He already missed the vast open space of the desert desperately, and it was only Monday morning. After leaving the group behind, he and Piccolo had slept the day away. Krillin had been there, patiently waiting for them to wake up that night with food and water. After reassuring Gohan that he had the group under control, he had left and the two finally were able to enjoy the trip as they had originally intended. That last weekend had been pure bliss spent sparring, meditating, and talking. But like all good things, it had come to an abrupt end. When Gohan had not returned with the main group, Bulma and Chi-Chi had sent Vegeta out to bring him home. The resulting lecture his mother had heaped upon his head had ruined his hearing for at least an hour after its end. Piccolo, even though he wasn't physically present for the verbal barrage, had no choice but to be subjected to it psychically. His low voice had echoed through Gohan's mind, "See, this is why she is the Banshee." In an extreme lapse in judgment, Gohan had actually smirked at his comment, enjoying Piccolo's humor. Chi-Chi had taken that as a sign, confirming her worst fears that he had become a delinquent. It had been a long evening. Settling back in his chair, Gohan pushed his surroundings away and listened to Piccolo's thoughts. absorbed the sensations around him. He was by his waterfall. The sound was a reassuring backdrop to the low rumble of his friend's voice. He knew Piccolo would leave for the lookout soon to help Dende. With a slight pang, Gohan realized he would be unable to talk to Dende during his day anymore. The ringing bell interrupted his thoughts. Sighing, Gohan got up and headed to his next class. That is when the trouble started. History tended to be rather dull. The teacher, Mrs. Kinito, loved obscure facts. Since Gohan had nothing to do in her class, it had become her goal to find something interesting for him to work on. Unfortunately, it was her version of interesting. Today he was to read an archaeological report on the Byzantine Empire and then discuss it from an anthropological point of view. After Gohan finished reading the report over, he started jotting down his response. What he found himself writing down was how to control the 7 air currents of the Earth. Shaking his head, he tried to focus on the dry topic instead of Piccolo's lesson with Dende. Up on the lookout, Piccolo was attempting to give Dende a practical lesson in controlling the Earth's air currents. Instead of telling him how to guide the currents, he started telling him about some dead civilization. Growling in annoyance, he tried to push Gohan's thoughts to the side and reclaim his own. It only got worse throughout the day. By gym, Gohan had to admit that while he loved the constant baritone rumble of Piccolo in his head, it made school difficult. On the trip, the physical activity seemed to help them retain independent thought. Now, with Gohan physically unable to move around and his brain in neutral, concentrating on completely different tasks than Piccolo felt impossible. Added to that, Gohan had not only his own aggravation, but also Piccolo's frustration and disdain for petty human studies filling him as well. Growling in frustration, Gohan walked over to where the advanced students were waiting for him. "Hey brains!" Sharpener yelled. Gohan cringed. Did he have to be so loud? We were wondering if you could maybe. Gohan did not catch the rest of that mumbled statement. If I could what Sharpener? He snapped irritably. Instead of answering, Sharpener just stood staring at his feet. Videl took over. Well, she gestured to the rest of the advanced students, were wondering if you could train as the way Piccolo trained you. Gohan just stared at her. Well, it's just that you are so strong and fast. We were hoping to. She broke off from her awkward request, because Gohan was no longer staring at her. He was on the floor laughing. He tried to stop, he really did. But Piccolo was feeding him images of just what he should do to the Bakas if he granted their request. Far away at his waterfall, Piccolo's day was finally getting better. Gohan's hilarity had drawn the attention from the rest of the class. Krillin walked over, wanting to know what set him off. We just asked if he would train as the same way Piccolo trained him. Videl answered, gesturing to him helplessly. Krillin looked at her for a moment, and then joined Gohan on the floor. By now the entire class was standing around them. Sucking in a few deep breaths, Krillin wiped the tears from his face and turned to Gohan. Don't you dare, don't even think about it Gohan. I want to keep my job. But coach, we want him to. Sharpener whined. He had never seen people do the things he had seen on that trip. It had made his own skills seem infantile in comparison. Do you even know what his training entailed? Krillin demanded, exasperated. Well, I can't remember everything he said, but it couldn't have been that bad, after all he managed it when he was little. Videl interjected defensively. The initial shock of meeting the Demon King had made the memory a bit hazy. Krillin looked at Gohan, silently demanding that he explain. Waving his hand in agreement, the still chuckling Demi-Saiyan rose from the ground. Okay, did you all enjoy your couple days out in the wilderness on your own? Gohan asked. His answer was several shudders. No one had really enjoyed those 2 days. Well, that was the first 6 months of my training, 6 months, in that very desert, completely on my own. After those 6 months, Piccolo and I sparred every day for a minimum of 12 hours. Though I guess at that point it wasn't really sparring. He beat me into a bloody pulp on a daily basis until I learned to keep up. Gohan sighed nostalgically. He really missed that time in his life. Bringing himself back to the present, he rubbed his hands together in anticipation, his eyes took on an unholy gleam. Okay, let's get started. Since I cannot force you to stay in the wild for 6 months, we can just skip to the second half. Who's first? As one, the entire class scrambled back from him. See coach? Videl asked, her voice shaking, can we train with you today? Miles away, Piccolo lost the battle and actually laughed aloud. Krillin stood back and watched his class. He had the entire room working on drills, except Gohan. He had actually looked disappointed when no one had taken him up on his offer. In the interest of public safety, Krillin had him meditating across the room, hoping the kid was just having a bad day. Looking over to his new charge, Krillin watched Videl work through her drills. She was definitely the strongest regular student in the class, at least physically. His face tightened in anger, as he recalled his conversation with the girl's father. After 18 had taken Videl out for the day, he had left Marin with Bulma so he could have his discussion without his daughter's little ears present. Krillin was already angry with Satan, and not just because of the cell incident. The man had never bothered to check on his daughter the entire trip. When he had arrived at the mansion, all Krillin had to say was one word: Gohan. That was it. The self-proclaimed savior of the world had turned into a spineless, sniveling, shuddering mass on the floor. He had begged Krillin to protect him from the boy, that it wasn't his fault he had taken the credit. After all, it made perfect sense to lie through your teeth for years, right? After 15 minutes of whining, begging, and crying, he finally remembered to ask after Videl. In the interest of Videl's feelings, Krillin had not helped the man into an early appointment with King Yema, but it had been close. Instead, he had calmly explained his wish for Videl to stay with his family. Krillin had stressed his desire to provide her with a little more stability and companionship in her home life. He had even gone so far as to offer the possible explanation to the press that Satan didn't want his baby alone while he went on tour. In a true moment of selflessness, Satan had agreed. Thanks to 18 having the paperwork ready for him, they were now Videl's official temporary guardians. She could stay with them for as long as she wanted. Glancing at the clock, Krillin called an end to the class. Good job today everyone, go hit the showers. Enjoying the bright endless expanse of sky around him, Gohan flew to Capsule Corporation. Since Krillin had been unwilling to let him work with the other students today, which he had to admit was probably a good thing, he had spent his time talking with Piccolo. They had hit upon an interesting thought. If Gohan's key net he had used on the trip nullified the physical ability to sense the ki of anyone caught in it, would it have a similar effect on a scouter? Landing lightly beside the entrance, Gohan felt out Bulma's ki, finding it in her lab. He noted that Vegeta and Trunks were in the GR, probably training. He really did not want to be pulled into a spar right now. Avoiding that hallway, he took the long way around. Hey kiddo, Bulma said brightly. She had started to exit the lab just as Gohan approached it. I'm glad you're here. I have something for you. Gesturing for him to follow, the excited woman led the way back into her lab. Searching through the pile on her desk, she held out an envelope. Gohan silently opened the envelope and examined the contents. Feeling his knees weaken, he sat down heavily in a chair. It was a check, made out in his name, for 25,698.45 zeni. Not trusting his voice, he looked up at Bulma in shock, raising an eyebrow in question. Gohan, remember, you get a portion of the sales from your kit. Bulma said gently. We released it for pre-order at the start of your class's trip. That's your percentage of the profits. We are currently sold out with a 3-week waiting list. Gohan stared at the numbers, they didn't change. He had a small fortune in his hand, all from a simple idea. It was not that simple, and you know it, kid. Piccolo stated gruffly. But it was simp. Try telling that to someone that doesn't know better. You had to develop the technology for those kits, making them light enough to carry and wearable so no one would lose it. Now snap out of it, Bulma's talking to you. Snapping his attention back to Bulma, he tried to comprehend what she was telling him. She wanted him to do freelance work for CC. She was offering him a chance to have a completely flexible means of supporting himself and his family. Nodding slightly, he agreed. Bulma sighed quietly. She was not entirely sure if Gohan had really understood her or not. Deciding to discuss it with him again when he was a little more coherent, she asked. Now, since I know you didn't show up for your paycheck, why did you stop by? Oh, scouter, I wanted to see if you had a scouter. He answered distractedly. Sure, I made up a few of them a while back. Hold on a sec. Bulma walked over to a massive cabinet and pulled out the requested technology. Here you go, but why do you need one? Oh, just wanted to try a theory out. Thanks, Bulma. Gohan got up and headed for a window. He needed to be outside, now. No problem. Gohan didn't hear her. He was already gone. Landing beside Piccolo, the two started working. Standing back from Gohan, Piccolo waited while he cast his net around him. Piccolo was still able to feel Gohan's ki through their link. Though he noted that physically, the reassuring pulse of his friend's energy was absent. Putting the scouter to his face, he activated it. Nothing. The net was able to fool even the device. Slowly rising into the air, Piccolo kept the scouter trained on Gohan. As he reached a height of about 15 feet, he flew in an arch over the still figure below. Suddenly the scouter started beeping wildly, picking up Gohan's energy signal. Well, that's annoying, kid. Unless you expect the enemy to stay at exactly at your height, you've got one hell of a hole. Gohan let the net dissipate, a pensive look upon his face. Piccolo just sat back and watched him work. It never ceased to amaze him what a quick and agile mind Gohan possessed. Images, thoughts, reasoning, all flashed through Piccolo's mind at an astonishing pace. Satisfied that he had thought of a workable solution, Gohan nodded to his sensei. Building and weaving his ki together, he cast it away in a perfect sphere. Once again, Piccolo flew around and over him, the scouter never made a sound. Satisfied, Gohan began to move around within the bubble, but as he approached the perimeter, the little device showed signs of picking him up, emitting sporadic beeps. Frowning in thought, Gohan examined the outer edges of his ki sphere. It seemed to bleed into nothingness instead of having a sharp outline. Returning to the center, Gohan began weaving a tight lattice of ki, condensing the layers tightly together before pushing the new sphere into place. Moving to the very edge, he felt as though he had hit a solid wall. The scouter is not picking anything up now. Without our link, I wouldn't be able to sense you either. But, yeah, I know, but, the ki sphere had a weakness, one that would quickly render it useless in a real fight. It stayed anchored in place. Meaning if Gohan was not careful, he would exit its boundaries. It needed to move with him. Returning to the center once again, he carefully collected the strands he had left as an anchor. Hooking the strands into his own ki, the sphere became mobile. Gohan and Piccolo worked together for several hours, trying to master the technique. Piccolo could now cast his own sphere, though it was not as dense as Gohan's yet. Fortunately, maintaining the sphere was effortless compared to the monstrous net he had cast over the desert. Either that or his ability had been strengthened by the extreme strain of holding it for so long. Leaving his friend for the night, Gohan flew for home. The moment Gohan's feet touched the ground, he was bombarded by the whirlwind otherwise known as Goten. Hey Squirt. Hi Gohan, I got to spend the day with Mom and we went to the store and we got lots of food and we, whoa, slow down buddy. You went grocery shopping with Mom today? Gohan asked. Yep, and dinner's ready and I'm really hungry and Mom's mad. He finished happily. Why is Mom mad? Cause your school called and Mom yelled really loud at the principal guy and then Mom broke some dishes and then she yelled really loud again and... Okay Goten, slow down, breathe. Gohan ordered. Goten just beamed at him. Gohan smiled in return. His little brother was a constant source of sunshine in his life. Gohan slowly entered the house. He had no idea why the principal had called his mother. But if she was that upset about it, caution seemed healthy. Mom, I'm home. Chi-Chi came charging out of her kitchen domain. Son Gohan, you have some serious explaining to do. She shrieked. Gohan gave her a confused look. Had he been that bad at school? Your principal called. How could you? You were supposed to blend in, make friends, and find a nice girl. I want grandbabies. How can you provide me with grandbabies if you leave school early? Chi-Chi's voice had been rising in volume and pitch with every word. Wincing in pain, his hands over his ears, Gohan risked asking, leave school early. He wants you to graduate early. That horrible man said his teachers had nothing for you to do. What did you do? Lowering his hands, Gohan considered his mother. He respected and loved her. She was a strong and determined person. However, he also found her utterly frustrating sometimes. Knowing this was her way of ensuring his happiness, he chose his words carefully. My first day of school, I solved a simple equation. From there, I had every teacher asking me some basic questions. Gohan sighed. He really did not want to upset her. She has to know, kid. I know, but telling her that I don't want to be a scholar will break her heart. So what, you'll spend the rest of our lives with your nose in a book? Piccolo asked, mentally shuddering in revulsion at the thought. No, I won't do that to either of us. Turning his attention back to his mother, he continued. It turns out that that simple equation and those basic questions weren't so simple to everyone else. I've spent every day since just biding my time, waiting for the day to end. Well, they will need to find something for you to do. I want you to stay and find a nice girl. You'll get married and I'll get grandbabies. She approached him, shaking a finger. My baby is going to finish school with all of his little friends, then go to a university, and become a great scholar. None of that will happen if you leave school now. Mom, I'm only 17, isn't that a little young to marry? Gohan asked, laughing. Then a disturbing thought hit him. To give his mother her coveted grandchildren, he had to find a mate and be well with her. He and Piccolo were tied together in nearly every sense. That meant that Piccolo would also be participating in every way but physically. Stop right there, kid. I don't need that image in my head. A horrified Piccolo shouted. Shaking the images away and ignoring the Namekian curses running through his mind, he saw his mother tapping her foot. She had noticed his inattention. Sighing again, he gathered his courage. Mom, I really wouldn't mind leaving school early. I do not like it there. No, you will stay for the remainder of the year. You have to have friends, Gohan. I do have friends, Mom. Would they stop being my friends just because I no longer attended school? That is not the point. I need you in school. Normal kids go to school. For once I want you to have the chance to be normal. Tears were forming in Chi-Chi's eyes. Her oldest son's lack of a childhood troubled her deeply. This was her way of making up for that and no one was going to stop her. Gohan sighed in defeat. He could not stand to see his mother cry. Okay, Mom, I'll wait to graduate if it's that important to you. But, I do not want to spend the rest of my life studying. I need more than that. Here, I have something to show you. Reaching into his pocket, he withdrew the check Bulma had given him and handed it to her. Fortunately for Chi-Chi, her son was fast enough to catch her when she fainted. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. A new episode will be out soon.